For our next presentation, we welcome back Dr. Sekema back to the stage. For those of you who are not here this morning, Peter recently retired after 36 years at the University of Guelph, Ridgetown campus, where he focused on weed management and field crops. Peter taught several courses including applied weed science and herbicide biochemistry and physiology. Peter published more than 445 peer-reviewed manuscripts, and Peter is a source of practical solutions for farmers and has readily shares his knowledge with primary producers. Peter has presented the results from his research program at hundreds of grower meetings, scientific conferences across Canada, the United States, and globally. This afternoon, he'll provide insights into why registered herbicides can cause crop damage.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. The question I'd like to address in my presentation this afternoon is, why do registered herbicides cause crop injury? So crop injury can be due to numerous different reasons, and I've divided them into 7 different categories. First of all, you could get injury from herbicides in crops due to extremes in weather. It could be unique or variable soil characteristics. It could be application errors, seeding problems, interaction with other pesticide, herbicide residues, and finally, it could just simply be sensitive crop hybrids or cultivars. So in terms of extremes in weather, although in my lecture I cover 9 of them, I'm only going to cover 2 of them today. And the first one will be, actually there's 5, sorry. It'll be too cold and wet after seeding with soil-applied herbicides, too much rain after soil-applied herbicides, too cold at application with post-emergence herbicides, too hot and humid with post-emergence herbicides, and finally, large diurnal fluctuations in temperature with post-emergence herbicides. So in terms of cool, wet conditions after seeding delays crop emergence and active plant growth, which delays or reduces herbicide metabolism. So one of the reasons why you can apply a herbicide to a crop for weed control is the crop has this amazing ability to digest or degrade that phytotoxic molecule into something not poisonous to itself. And under cool, wet conditions, the plant has not begun active plant growth, and it simply can't metabolize the herbicide. And so you get greater crop injury with almost all soil-applied herbicides. And I'm going to just use one example. This is actually in my research plots. It's actually a commercial farm in Ontario where we were looking at water hemp control in soybean. And you can see that the soybean sure didn't come up as a typical soybean plant. You have these really thick, leathery cotyledons that have emerged from the soil. And then you take a picture a couple weeks later and you can notice this crinkling of the leaves. You have this distorted leaf, heart-shaped leaf. And that is simply due to cold, wet conditions, and the soybean couldn't metabolize the herbicide. And the herbicide manufacturer is aware of that. And I took this straight from the herbicide label. And it says on the Volterra, or the Fierce label, sorry, crop injury may occur from applications made under cool, wet conditions. And so the manufacturers are aware that in some situations, the crop can't metabolize the herbicide. The second one is too much rain with soil-applied herbicides. Too much rain may move the herbicide into the root zone of the crop. And it's important for herbicides where root uptake dominates and spatial separation is the basis of selectivity. The reason why you can use Prowl for weed control in corn, you always lay it on the soil surface. You never apply it pre-plant incorporated. You are counting on the herbicide staying on the soil surface and not getting into the root zone of the crop. And if you have heavy rain on a light textured soil, it can move the herbicide into the root zone of the crop, get greater than normal uptake and crop injury. I took this picture in a farmer's field near where I live, and I was shocked at the reduced root growth of corn. And this is what Prowl does when it gets into the root zone of the corn. You get these short, stubby roots. Presumably, it was a light, sandy textured soil, as you can see in the picture. They got a heavy rain event, and it moved the herbicide into the root zone of the corn. Too much rain at the wrong time. In terms of frontier injury and dry beans, the worst time to get a rain event is just as the beans are knuckling through the soil surface. If you get a ½ inch of rain, it dissolves the herbicide into soil water solution. The dry bean plant takes up more than a normal amount of herbicide. And if you hadn't seen this injury before, you would have thought it was Sencor injury in soybean, but this is what a group 15 does in dry beans, which is really surprising. And you can see this necrosis around the leaf margin over here. And then later in the season, you can see that the plant dropped all of the cotyledons, it dropped the unifoliate leaves, and if it's really bad, it will drop the first trifoliate leaf as well. And you will get delayed maturity and decreased yield. In terms of too cold at the time of post-emergence herbicides, cold temperatures at application reduces crop metabolism, which may result in crop injury from post-emergence herbicides. This happens to be Rick McCracken's farm. If I like a farmer, I put his name on the slide. If I don't, I keep it to myself. Anyways, Rick McCracken called me one morning and said, "Peter, I have buctrel M injury in my winter wheat, and I worked for 3 of the herbicide manufacturers before I went to our Ridgetown campus. I worked for Union Carbide, May and Baker, then Rome Plank. They're all Bayer Crop Science now. I was indoctrinated as a new employee that the safest post-emergence herbicide in cereals for weed control was buctrel M, right? And it takes me 45 minutes to drive to Rick McCracken's farm from Ridgetown, Ontario, and I spent 45 minutes going through in my head how I was going to educate Rick McCracken and tell him that he had to be wrong. And this happens to be the first field that he sprayed that spring. And you can see where the wheat is dark green in color. That's where only water was in the spray boom. And you can see exactly when the herbicide got to the nozzle tips, and you can see the discoloration in the wheat. And then I took this close-up picture of it, and you can see dramatic injury in his wheat. And so the question is why did Rick McCracken get injury from a herbicide that's supposed to have a really wide margin of crop safety? And the reason was it went down to below freezing temperatures the night that he applied. The winter wheat couldn't metabolize the herbicide, and you get this crop injury. In terms of too hot and humid with post-emergence herbicides, there's 3 reasons. First of all, it's easier for the herbicide to cross the cuticle. So warm temperatures can soften the cuticle, resulting in greater herbicide absorption and activity. The crop does not metabolize the herbicide as efficiently at high temperatures, or you could have simply used too high a rate of the adjuvant for the weather conditions at the time of application. So in terms of too hot and humid, the cuticle is just more fluid. So if you think of hot temperatures, think of the candle on your child's birthday cake. As temperature goes up, so as soon as you light the flame on that candle, that wax goes from a solid to a liquid. It does the exact same thing on the leaf surface of a plant, not to the same extent, but as temperature goes up, it becomes more fluid, and it's easier for the herbicide to cross the cuticle and get into the living portion of the plant. And once again, the herbicide manufacturer is aware of that, and it says on the Basagran label, use of Basagran herbicide in hot, humid weather may result in temporary yellowing, leaf flecking, bronzing, or burning. The second reason why you get injury under hot, humid conditions is simply reduced metabolism. This is a steadfast injury in corn, and so you get this yellow flash on this corn, severe growth distortion, and these pinched ears. Once again, Corteva knows that, and Corteva has a statement on the label that corn does not metabolize the sulfonylurea herbicides such as Steadfast as efficiently when temperatures are above 30 degrees Celsius. And it's the exact same thing in soybean with group 2 herbicides like Classic, First Rate, Pinnacle, and Pursuit. They don't metabolize them as well under hot, humid conditions, and you get this reddening of the veins on the lower side of the leaf. It can be severe stunting of the soybean, and if it's really bad, you can kill the growing point, and you get a soybean plant with multiple stems instead of a plant with typically one stem per plant. So this happens to be a farm in Kent County in Ontario, and I really want to point out to you how good the outside row of the soybean are. So this farmer obviously didn't drive close enough to the edge of the field, and this one row was not injured because the herbicide wasn't applied. Notice the severe injury from a hot tank mix, Reflex and Pinnacle in soybean under hot, humid conditions. I took a close-up picture of it. Notice the reddening of the veins, that's typical of Pinnacle. You have the bronzing of the leaves, that's typical of Reflex, and it's accentuated under hot, humid conditions. The fifth thing in terms of weather conditions, it could be due to a large diurnal fluctuations in temperature, and you get increased crop injury because the corn cannot metabolize the herbicide as efficiently. Here you can see pinched ears in corn due to a group 2 herbicide, and corn does not metabolize Steadfast as efficiently when the diurnal fluctuation in temperature is greater than 20 degrees Celsius. And once again, if you read the label, it says a rapid fluctuation in temperature greater than 20 degrees Celsius within 24 to 36 hours will stress the corn crop. And the company recommends, for maximum crop safety, allow 24 hours for the corn to acclimatize before spraying. And really interesting, a graduate student of mine, Brendan Metzger, he had an injury in corn from a new Group 27 herbicide Shieldex, and he could correlate injury from Shieldex due to a large diurnal fluctuations in temperature similar to the Group 2 herbicides. And finally, in terms of too hot and humid, if you here you can see an excessive adjuvant rate, and most farmers in Ontario are aware of that, and if it's hot and humid, they will just cut back on the rate of the adjuvant so they reduce the amount of injury to the crop. The second category is unique or variable soil characteristics. It could be coarse soil texture, low in organic matter, soil crusting, low pH or high pH. On coarse textured soils that are low in organic matter, most soil applied herbicides are more biologically available. There's just fewer binding sites in the soil for the herbicide, and you get increased injury with almost all soil applied herbicides. So once again, this is a cornfield in southwestern Ontario. They asked me to go and have a look at it. And I was pretty confident in my answer, and I think it's pretty apparent. Look at the corn. It's 4 feet high all around it. And then you get on this sandy knoll, and you have severe crop injury to the point that you're killing some of the corn plants. But I left the field pretty confident, and I just said, hey, that's a sandy knoll, light sandy textured soil, fewer binding sites for the herbicide. It stays in soil water solution. The corn takes it up. And that's the injury that you get. And the herbicide manufacturer is aware of it. And it says on the Converge Flex label, do not apply Converge to field corn grown on loamy sands or sands and or soils with less than 2% organic matter. What absolutely amazed me, a couple of years later, I was asked to go to see this field in Essex County. I grew up in Wellington County, and we had hills on the farm. I think this field is flat. And notice that you need only really subtle changes in soil characteristics. And you can see this injury once again from the same herbicide. And notice how good the corn is around that injured area. So it's really subtle changes in soil characteristics that can result in a crop injury. This,
Question, Dr. Sigmund.
yeah.
Back to, we use a lot of metribuzin in here, and that's exactly what the label says, is you shouldn't use it on PEI, but we use it continually on potatoes. So just one comment or clarification from you, like metribuzin, if we're using the rate for ever saw an injury, the question relates to crop injury on the following year from a metribuzin class of herbicide. It would have to have not broken down, which is contrary to what
Yeah.
we're doing today.
So, and I won't speak for PEI, I'm not an expert on PEI. In Ontario, when metribuzin's used at the label rates, we have little to no concerns in terms of herbicide carryover to sensitive crops. And the rate of metribuzin that's registered in Ontario is unbelievably high. You can put it on at 1,120 grams per hectare. Almost no farmer would apply it at that rate. It would cost them $60 an acre. And just because of price, nobody's going to use it at those rates. So typically we don't have a problem with carryover. And it would be far more with another Group 5 herbicide like atrazine. So this happens to be a really interesting farmer. Anyways, he plants 6 rows of soybean, 6 rows of corn, 6 rows of soybean. And he feels he's getting higher yields of his corn. He always plants in a north-south direction. The sun comes up in the morning and from the east, so let's say this row of corn would get greater sunlight interception in the morning, and the one on this side gets greater interception in the afternoon. Corn's a higher value crop than soybean, and overall he thinks he's increasing farm profitability. Anyways, that sure isn't the reason why he asked me to go to his farm. And I know that it's a herbicide injury. If you look at the tree right over here, you can see the height of the corn where he backed up and started spraying. So I know that it came out of the spray tank. What amazed me on this field is here you can see this is just a small, lower area in the field. And the corn's deep green in color. You can see the color of the soil, it's dark, and the corn's about 1 foot tall. I take 20 steps, right? That's all I took. And you go up on this sandy knoll and look at the impact of soil characteristics on the tolerance of herbicide, of tolerance of corn to a soil-applied herbicide like broad strike. So just amazing that you don't have to go very far in the field at all to get these changes. I remember this field really well. Anyways, this farmer asked me to go look at his cornfield, and I knew that Group 15 herbicides cause shepherd's crooking in corn, and I explained to the farmer he had a 50 acre field or 100 acres, and there was 1 acre that was injured on top of the sandy knoll. And I said there was light soil characteristics, fewer binding sites. The herbicide was taken up by the corn plant, and it resulted in this shepherd's crooking of the corn. And the farmer wasn't happy with my explanation at all, right? And he was right in my face and used way more 4-letter words than I'm ever comfortable using. And he may as well have said, "Sycamore, if you're so smart, why is this corn plant perfectly fine and the one 6 inches away has extremely bad shepherd's crooking," right? And all as I could tell him is that I think we can be sure that this plant, for whatever reason, took up more herbicide than the one beside it. It could have been due to differences in time of emergence. It could have been different seeding depth. It could have been differences in seed furrow closure, or just the way the herbicide migrated down into the soil. Anyways, this plant obviously took up way more than the one 6 inches away. And I'm standing by my explanation. It is Group 15 injury, and it was on a light textured soil where the herbicide was taken up more. In terms of soil crusting, it delays emergence and active plant growth, which results in greater crop injury. Since the plant does not begin to metabolize the herbicide as soon, it's the same as cold, wet weather, so I won't say anything more. In terms of low soil pH, some herbicides such as Pursuit are more persistent at low soil pH, resulting in greater injury to sensitive crops in the rotation. So this happens to be processing tomatoes. This is in southwestern Ontario. This farmer followed the label perfectly, right? He grew soybean. He used Pursuit for weed control in his soybean. The next year he grew corn, and then the year after he grew tomatoes. And the Pursuit label at the time when this picture was taken, it said you could plant any crop you wanted 22 months after application. So this farmer did everything right. And this is the impact of Pursuit residues in the soil. But the really interesting thing in this picture is, notice how severe the injury is here. This field was all one field. It was all treated the same. And notice how good the tomatoes are here and going to the left over there. And I want to give the people from BSF credit. I didn't do this. They did intensive soil sampling. They correlated tomato injury from Pursuit applied 2 years previously to the soil pH. I had no idea that soil pH could change that much over a 60-inch spacing. That's what they grow tomatoes on, 60-inch beds. And that's the impact of soil pH and possible injury from that herbicide 2 years later.
Define how low that pH would be, because their soil is acidic.
And so we had lots of information. It was lower than 6. And so not real low, but it was still low for our area. Yep.
No, well, 6 would be relatively high.
Okay.
Here, so
Yep, yep. So then it's going to be even greater. Yep, carry over here.
yeah, Pursuit would, yeah.
Yep.
That's what I was,
Yep,
yeah.
yep, yep. So on high soil pH, there can be greater uptake of herbicides because they release that proton that I was talking about this morning. The herbicide now has a negative charge. It's repelled by the soil. It stays in soil water solution, and the plant can take it up. So here you can see the injury from Sencor on high pH soils in soybean. And notice the injuries around the leaf margin. And it's always the most pronounced on the lower leaf of the plant. That makes perfect sense. Sencor is a xylomobile herbicide. It moves with water in the plant. The area of highest transpiration water loss on that leaf is around the leaf margin, and that's why you see the yellowing around the leaf margin with Sencor. So we did a study at the Huron Research Station. The soil pH is about 8 at the Huron Research Station. In the background, just the way the randomization worked out in the experiment, this is the untreated block. In the foreground is where Sencor was applied at twice the label rate. And notice the stunting of the soybean at the Huron Research Station. We did the exact same experiment at Ridgetown campus. The pH is 6.5. We used 4 different soybean cultivars at the 2 locations. One was the same at both so that we could compare. We had 0 injury at Ridgetown, and this is the injury we had at the Huron Research Station, and they're both Brookston clay loam soils. The only difference is the soil pH, and that's the impact of soil pH on crop injury. In terms of application errors, I will go through all 11 of these. First of all, you could use an excessive herbicide rate. The rate could be too high for the soil type or soil pH. This was covered earlier, so I won't go into that. In terms of excessive herbicide rate, it could be spray overlaps, or it's too high a rate for the crop. So obviously I like this farmer. His name's Stephen Twinstra, and he asked me to go see his white bean field, and he was concerned about this injury, and you can see why. And at least he was honest with me. He said he finished spraying the field, and he finished in this corner, right? The field entry point is right over here, so he drove over here to the bush, and then he drove in this direction, and that's where he would exit the field. And he had a wee bit left in the tank, and he put on what he considered to be about a half rate. That's the impact of using a three-way mix and then putting it on at 1.5 times the label rate. However, this field, and you'll notice I don't have a name on it, I remember going there, and they asked me what was going on, and it was about a 50-acre field, and 1 acre is injured, right? But it doesn't follow the soil at all. It's a straight line. When I teach crop diagnostics and recommendations, I always tell the students if injury or a pattern in the field is in a straight line, it is because of human activities. Nothing in nature follows straight lines. It's going to be random circles or whatever. Anyways, here you can see, I know what happened here. This applicator finished the field over there. He had a wee bit left in the tank, drove in this direction, and then he drove over there, and then it ran out. Anyways, I met the farmer, the ag retailer, the person from the spray applicator, and I said, hey, it was you had a little left in the tank, and you turned around and sprayed it out, and it's all in straight lines that came out of the sprayer. And the spray applicator just looked me in the eye and said he didn't do it, right? And I just said, you know, I'm not getting involved. That's my analysis, and now it's between you and the applicator to figure out if you want any compensation. This is my research plots, and so it's excess of herbicide rate for the crop, and the herbicide I'm using is Pursuit as my example. Soybean are a really robust crop, and I'm totally comfortable with recommending 160 milliliters of Pursuit for weed management in soybean. Azuki beans aren't quite as robust, and the highest rate that I'm comfortable with is 125 milliliters per acre. That is the lowest rate on the Pursuit label. I think I'm an ethical guy. I usually follow the label. Whenever I do presentations for weed management in dry beans in Ontario, I make off-label recommendations, and the label is a legal document in Canada. And I still do it. And our research shows that kidney and cranberry beans are simply not tolerant enough to the label rate of Pursuit. And the highest rate that I'm comfortable with is 100 milliliters per acre. And white and black beans are even more sensitive, and the highest rate that I'm comfortable with is 75 mils per acre. And you can see on the screen at the front of the room the injury from Pursuit in white beans when it's applied at the label rate. So that's why I don't apply it. Really interesting, I was chatting with a farmer. Pursuit got registered in 1989 in Ontario. He applied Pursuit at the label rate, and that's what farmers should typically do, 125 mils per acre on white beans. And he said his white bean yields were flatlined for 10 years, right? He just didn't get any increase in yield no matter what he did. And then I presented our research to him. He reduced the rate, and he said his yields were going up every year since he reduced the rate of Pursuit on his white beans. This is just too many herbicides in the tank. Anyways, I took this picture only 2 years ago. And so this is a white bean injury from Trefland Permit, Pursuit, and Command. And you know what? That's just too many herbicides in the tank. The plant expends energy to metabolize every single one of those herbicides, and you've just overloaded the metabolic pathways to break down those herbicides. And this is a close-up of the injury that was in the field. In terms of the adjuvant, I think you should adjust the adjuvant based on how robust the crop is. And so here we're looking at Basagran. And I say adjust your adjuvant choice depending on the sensitivity of the crop to the herbicide. As I mentioned earlier, soybean are a really robust crop, and you can use a really aggressive adjuvant like cyst plus 28% nitrogen. Dry beans are kind of intermediate. They're not as robust, and you may choose to take the 28% out because it could result in a crop injury. And processing peas are a far more succulent crop, and you may use a more gentle adjuvant such as Silhouette Plus on peas. Keep in mind, as you go from a more aggressive adjuvant, as you go from a more aggressive adjuvant like Assist plus UAN to a more gentle adjuvant like Silhouette Plus, you are going to give up weed control because you're using a less aggressive adjuvant, but you're going to gain in crop safety. And when I have a conversation with a farmer, I give him the information, and then I say, the choice is yours. You have to decide, is crop safety more important to you or improved weed control? And a second example would be a reflex. I think in soybean, you might choose to use SureMix, and dry beans are more sensitive, and you might use a less aggressive adjuvant such as Agrel 90. In terms of excessive adjuvant, you should reduce the rate under hot, humid conditions, as we talked about earlier. This is a really interesting field. It's a field of corn near Blythe, Ontario. And this farmer applied Roundup plus Converge plus Atrazine plus High Activate and Interlock. And I think you'd agree with me that you can understand why the farmer called me and asked me to have a look at his corn. That corn is really injured, and I think the answer is real straightforward. The label says you can use Converge plus Atrazine. The label doesn't say that you can add Roundup, High Activate, or Interlock. Roundup has adjuvant properties. It's got a really aggressive adjuvant in it. Then High Activate is a non-ionic surfactant. Interlock's a drift retardant, but it has adjuvant properties as well. And there's just way too much adjuvant there, and you got increased uptake of the Converge, and you're seeing that Converge injury. And here's a close-up of it, and I think you'd agree with me, that is pretty severe injury. So I went to this field a couple of years ago, so I tried to repeat it in my research plots last summer. And here you can see Converge applied by itself. There was 1% injury in corn. Converge plus Atrazine is 1%. This is Roundup ready corn, and you add Roundup and the injury goes to 11%. That's not glyphosate injury in the corn. That is Converge injury in the corn because of the aggressive adjuvant in Roundup that increased the uptake of Converge. You add another adjuvant and you get greater uptake, and it's 19% injury. And you add a third adjuvant and you can see it's 39% injury. This is what it looked like in my research plots last summer. There's Converge plus Atrazine. You add Roundup and you see some slight yellow discoloration. It's with High Activate. And you add Interlock and it's even worse. So we took those trials to yield. You can see that in the control plot there was 221 bushels per acre, and this over here, Converge, Atrazine, Roundup, High Activate, and Interlock, was 207 bushels per acre. So this farmer lost 14 bushels per acre at $6.56 per bushel. That's the average price of corn in Ontario for the 5 cropping seasons from 2019 to 23. He lost $92 per acre on a 250-acre corn crop. He would have lost $23,000. And on top of that, he spent another $1,500 on these adjuvants that he didn't need, right? So his real loss was $24,500 because he put too many things in the tank. In terms of using 28% as the herbicide carrier, and so I get calls from ag retail points in Ontario almost every year, and they say, can I put my herbicide in with my 28%? And you can put your nitrogen on your wheat and your weed control at one time. Don't do it. And here you can see the injury from Refine applied with 28% as the carrier. You add a herbicide to increase wheat yield, and you can see you decreased it because you got greater uptake of the herbicide and accentuated crop injury. In terms of the wrong application timing, this is 2,4-D applied in the fall in winter wheat. I remember the situation really well. One of the agronomists in Ontario called me, and he said, Peter, I have these winter annual weeds in wheat. It's now October 30. And he said, what can I apply to control those winter annuals? And my standard answer is, I don't have a clue. And I say, give me an acre and I'll try to figure it out for you. We applied all the post-broadleaf herbicides in the fall, and we saw no injury until July 1 of the next year. So 8 months after we applied the herbicide is the first time I saw injury. And this is what it looked like. You get this severe growth distortion. The heads don't emerge properly at all. And you get a substantial yield loss in your winter wheat because of 2,4-D applied in the fall. As the person that introduced me this afternoon said, I should be careful, I did teach the herbicide physiology and biochemistry course. I am fascinated by the intersection between chemistry and biology. This is MCPA. It is perfectly safe to apply MCPA in the fall. For all of you who forgot your chemistry courses, you should be fascinated. This is 2,4-D, and the only difference with 2,4-D and MCPA is 2,4-D as a chlorine at the number 2 position, MCPA as a methyl. If it has a methyl at the 2 position, perfectly safe to apply it in the fall. If you have a chlorine at the number 2 position, never do it. It's going to result in crop injury and yield loss. In terms of the wrong application timing, man, I always have way too many stories, but anyways, I got 10 minutes left. I better hurry up. In terms of the wrong application timing, this is a late application of Pinnacle in soybean. Notice the severe stunting. This is in my plots. And you get this reddening of the veins on the lower side of the leaf. And you get a corresponding decrease of 5 bushels per acre at $15 a bushel. You've lost $75 an acre because you applied the herbicide too late. So boom contamination is pretty obvious. You get this feathered or W pattern where the herbicide's in the boom and then the water pushes it out, and then you have no more injury through the remainder of the field. This is tank contamination. I remember it really well. I was driving along and nobody asked me to go to this field, and I just stopped and said, I know what's going on. That is dicamba tank contamination, and I know it's tank and not boom because the first tank was injured and the second one was no injury at all. And this is a close-up of the injury that you see. What shocked me, I was teaching my crop diagnostics and recommendations class, and I showed this picture in class, and one of the students raised his hand and said, that's our field. Now, if it was me and we had made that mistake, I would have kept my mouth shut, but he was quite willing to share with all his classmates that that was their farm. Anyways, this is glyphosate off-target movement. And so this happens to be identity preserved soybean adjacent to a no-till soybean field. The IP soybeans were up when his neighbor put on the burn down. And you can see this yellow discoloration in the growing point of the plant. And I remember being in the field with the grower, and he said, what should I do? And I said, get your planter out and plant 6 strips adjacent to his neighbor's no-till soybean field, because I was quite convinced that those soybean plants were going to die. Much to my surprise, and some of them did, and I have pictures of it, a lot of these turned green and resumed their growth, and I thought they would all die, and I'd still make the same recommendation I made, but I was surprised at how it recovered. So this is a Roundup off-target movement on tomatoes, and this farmer called me and said, Peter, can you have a look at my tomatoes? I'd like you to come this afternoon. I said, I can't come. And I almost never say no to a farmer, and it happened to me, my youngest daughter's birthday party, and I had agreed with my wife that I would pick up her and her friends from school that day for her birthday party. Anyways, I knew the farmer personally, and he said, Peter, I think it's serious. I'd really like you to have a look at it. And I said to him, I said, I'll be there at 2 o'clock. I'm leaving at 2:30. I have to be in Chatham at 3 o'clock, right? I got there and there's a dozen people in the field. There's people from the Ministry of Environment. There's the fieldman from the tomato processing company, the farmer. And I'm in a hurry. And I said, gentlemen, if this is glyphosate drift, you'll have yellow discoloration in the growing point of the tomato plant. And here you can see the yellow discoloration. And so I knew it was glyphosate drift. Really interesting. I parked my car on this road. This is the soybean field where the glyphosate came from. The field is 1,200 feet. The herbicide had moved across the entire field. Tomatoes are about, if you have a good crop, 50 tons per acre, $150 a ton. This farmer had 100% yield loss due to glyphosate drift, or $7,500 an acre. So everybody's heard about dicamba off-target movement, and so I'm going to even go faster now. But anyways, here you can see the characteristic cupping of dicamba. So these are IP soybean. This is the neighbor's Extend soybean, and you get that characteristic cupping of the leaves. I was asked to go to see this tobacco field, and I'll never forget it. This person called me. I knew the person, and they asked, we think we have dicamba drift on tobacco. Can you come and see it? And I said, no, I've never been in a tobacco field in my life. I don't want to get involved. I don't want to be in court in a lawsuit. They called me the week later and they asked, we think it's serious. Could you come? And I said, no, I'm not getting involved. Anyways, they called a third time, and you can see I relented. And this is the injury that I saw. I sent these pictures to a colleague of mine at University of Tennessee, and I said, Larry, does this look like dicamba drift? And he said, yep, you got it, right? And I remember talking to, it was a sister that farmed with two of her brothers, and I said, you guys are model citizens. I've been here for an hour. You have 70 acres of flue-cured tobacco worth $7,000 an acre. You're looking at a $500,000 loss due to off-target movement of a herbicide, and nobody used a four-letter word. And I will never forget what she said to me. She said, Peter, we went camping with our neighbors every year for 20 years. We didn't this year because of the off-target movement of a herbicide. And she went on to tell me that her dad was 73 years old. And she said her dad always sat beside his neighbor in church. And she said, I don't think he can anymore because of a herbicide, right? And I'm a data-driven guy. I don't talk if I don't have data to support what I'm talking about. There's a human component to this in terms of these herbicides. I'm going to just speed up here. Anyways, this is the wrong herbicide. I really felt bad for this farmer. He's a young guy, and he applied permit post-emergence on his soybean and for yellow nutsedge control, and I understand why he did. Permit's registered post in corn for nutsedge control. It's registered post in white beans for nutsedge control in soybean, or sorry, in white bean. So if it's safe in corn, safe in white beans, it's got to be safe in soybean. Never do it, right? And so this happens to be the part of the field that didn't have nutsedge. This did, and that's what it looked like. And really interesting, he said, what should I do? And I said, replant to soybean. He just killed his soybeans with the herbicide, and I told him to replant to the same crop. Soybean doesn't take up the herbicide through the roots and the elongating stem below the soil surface. It's perfectly safe to apply it to the soil, never apply it post-emergence. And you can see, really interesting, here he had 61 bushels per acre permit. These beans did turn green. He had 20 bushels. Where he reseeded, he had 44. We recommended that he apply Liberty to kill the first stand and then come back with soybean. In terms of seeding two problems, I'll just skip this. This is really interesting. So this is herbicide-herbicide interaction, and the reason why I say it's interesting, I couldn't figure it out, right? I was asked to go to this farmer's field, and the corn rows, as you can see, are growing this way in a north-south direction, and he applied a post-emergence herbicide. And so how could you get injury from applying a post-emergence herbicide and it's parallel to the corn rows, so soil type should have no effect, right? It's a post-herbicide. It shouldn't be influenced by the soil. And you know what it was? His neighbor put on glyphosate as a burn down. It drifted to his corn crop. The corn crop's now not feeling very well, right? It's been exposed to glyphosate drift. The corn cannot metabolize the in-crop herbicide, and you get this accentuated injury from the in-crop herbicide because you've injured it due to drift. So this is herbicide-fungicide interaction. So Buctril M, no injury, Folacure, no injury. And presumably the adjuvant in Folacure increased the uptake of Buctril M, and you get crop injury. Here's herbicide-fungicide micronutrient interaction. I did this research with a colleague of mine, Dave Hooker. Anyways, Buctril M, no injury. With Twin Line, no injury. You add this micronutrient, ammonium thiosulfate, and you can see the injury. In terms of herbicide carryover, you can have dry bean injury from Acuron carryover, and here you can see the Acuron injury in dry beans, which what really surprised me, this happens to be John Wall's farm, you can see it there. Anyways, I thought that those dry beans were really going to struggle for the growing season. I went back a couple times during the summer. They largely recovered and with really no impact on yield. This is atrazine carryover injury, dry bean injury from atrazine carryover. I had no idea that winter wheat was so susceptible to command carryover. This is actually in my research area at the Huron Research Station. We do trials in dry beans. We plant winter wheat. We are looking at command for weed control in dry beans, and that's what my winter wheat looked like. And so I'll finish up with sensitive crop hybrids in cultivars. I was amazed, right? So these are 12 different soybean cultivars. Only 4 of them are in the picture. Each row is a different cultivar. No injury at all with Aragon. This happens to be OAC Hanover, and dramatic injury. This is Calico Bell sweet corn that's sensitive to Clisto. This is Del Monte 2038 sweet corn that's sensitive to Basagran. Here you can see corn hybrid sensitivity to Shieldex. And the most dramatic field that I walked in terms of hybrid sensitivity was this cornfield in Kent County. This farmer had a 6-row planter, so just think he put 3 hoppers, he put Pioneer, 3 hoppers, he put a DeKalb hybrid. He turns around at the end of the field, so you get 6 rows alternating across the entire field. Then he applied 2,4-D for Candida fleabane control. The Pioneer hybrid was standing like a soldier, as you can see there, and the DeKalb hybrid was flat on the ground. I had never seen such a dramatic difference in hybrids to a herbicide. Really interesting. The next year I got 2 calls from 2 different growers, and it was the complete reverse. So it's specific hybrids, and in that case it was the Pioneer hybrid that was injured, and the DeKalb was not injured. So in summary, sometimes substantial crop yield losses can occur due to injury caused by herbicides. I am surprised at how bad a crop can look in terms of herbicide injury and how it can recover. This is that field of corn. I went back a month later, and it largely outgrew that injury. There was still probably a yield loss, but not very much. Maybe 5%. And here a farmer applied Integrity to his wheat. He was supposed to put on Infinity. I can understand how you would get those mixed up. And there's the injury, and I went back a month later and it had largely recovered. So thank you very much. If you have any questions at all, I'd be more than happy to try to address them.
You mentioned that in your research, soil organic matter, soil pH, and plant metabolism affected the chemical applied, and I wondered if you had any research. All those three are indicators of soil health, and I wondered if there was any research done on optimizing soil health to mitigate damage from chemicals applied, and also wondering if there's any research done on application of fulvic acid or humates in tank mixes to mitigate risks, as you were mentioning.
Yeah, and I have not done research on that, so I won't comment. I said I'm a data-driven guy. I don't want to say something I don't know. Anyone else? Yeah. So I was in a hurry when I got to that part of my presentation. The soybean field that I went to see, and I can still picture it. So I took the picture and I was facing east, right? And I was facing east, and there was the Extend soybean field that was on my right, and the IP soybean field was on my left, and I showed you the injury in the IP soybean. What amazed me is his neighbor on the other side of the field had the same injury. So there was movement of the herbicide going both north and south, so it had to be either a temperature inversion or volatilization. It was not physical drift at that time. And so I never talked about temperature inversions until Extend soybean got registered. And anyways, my daughter is a doctor in Chatham, Ontario. Every time I go to drive to Chatham, I look at the smokestack at the ethanol plant. And if the smoke comes out and it's flat, right, you had a temperature inversion. You know what surprises me? How many nights we have a temperature inversion in southwestern Ontario. So, and if you have a temperature inversion, nobody can tell you which direction the herbicide's going to move in.
Thank you. You showed the effect of Roundup kind of causing greater injury. Was that, I presume that's like with the Roundup WeatherMax. Do you have any idea of like some of the other glyphosate formulations that would have different adjuvants, or if you haven't looked at that?
So each proprietary formulation of glyphosate has its own adjuvant system. Really interesting. In contrast to the United States, all of the companies that sell a glyphosate-based herbicide in Canada, they're considered to be fully loaded formulations of glyphosate, and that means that all of them have an aggressive adjuvant system in the formulation. So I would expect that it would be really difficult to differentiate among glyphosate formulations in terms of that injury. I will say that in terms of weed control, my standard answer in class is, and I ask my students, which is your favorite glyphosate formulation? Mine is the one you can get at the lowest cost at your ag retail point. It is really hard to differentiate among glyphosate formulations in terms of herbicide efficacy. I will say when I have seen a difference, and I have seen it, but not very often, it usually favors the Bayer formulations. That makes sense. They've sold glyphosate the longest. They probably had 10 PhD research scientists trying to optimize that adjuvant in the formulation, and it makes sense that theirs might be incrementally better. Anyways, I think I'm using somebody else's time, so I better stop.